Hello guys. So in this session we are going to learn how to monitoring AWS EKS using Prometheus and Grafana. So in this video, we will guide you through the process of configuring Prometheus and Grafana for monitoring AWS EKS by integrating these tools, and you can effectively track metrics, set alerts, and visualize data. So ensuring optional performance for your EKS cluster. So let's start to monitoring AWS EKS using Prometheus and Grafana. So first of all, here we need to understand what is Amazon EKS, right? So Amazon EKS means Elastic Kubernetes Service. It is a managed Kubernetes service provided by Amazon Web Services, that means AWS, and it simplifies the process of deploying, managing, and scaling containerized applications using Kubernetes on AWS infrastructure. Then the next one is we need to understand what is Grafana. So as you know what is Grafana. So Grafana is an open source tool for performing data analytics, retrieving metrics that make sense of large amount of data, and monitoring our apps using nice configurable dashboard. Grafana integrates with a wide range of data source including Graphite, Prometheus, and Elasticsearch, MySQL, PostgreSQL, and others. So when connected to supports data source, it provided web-based charts and graphs and alerts. So that's the short information about Grafana, right? The next is what is Prometheus. So Prometheus is an open source monitoring and alerting toolkit designed for reliability, scalability in modern dynamic environments and developed by the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. Prometheus excels at collecting and storing time series data, allowing users to gain valuable insight into the performance and health of their applications and infrastructure. So that's the Prometheus, Grafana, and AWS EKS, that means Elastic Kubernetes Service. Then now here, monitoring AWS EKS architecture. So here we need to understand why we use Helm, right? Why we use Helm. So Helm services as a package manager tailored for Kubernetes environment. With Helm, deploying complex applications for managing multiple resources becomes simplifies and streamlined. So here, why leveraging Helm is advantageous, right? So here first is package management. So why it is advantageous? So first is package management. So in package management, Helm offers a structured way to manage and organize Kubernetes manifest, making it easier to deploy and manage application and services within your cluster. The next advantage is simplify installations. So Helm drastically simplifies the installation process by enabling you to install all required components with a single command, and this saves time and reduces chance of missing critical configuration step. The next is efficiency. By utilizing Helm, you can ensure that your Kubernetes deployment are efficient and consistent. Helm charts encapsulate best practices and standardized configuration, facilitating smoother deployments and reducing the risk of errors. And here, Helm empowers Kubernetes users to streamline their deployment workflows, enhance efficiency, and maintain consistency across their infrastructure. So that's why we are going to use Helm, right? That's the advantages of Helm, why we use Helm. So that's the reason we are going to use Helm. So now here, let's start here to monitoring AWS EKS using Prometheus and Grafana. So for that here, as you can see here, I mentioned some prerequisites. So before you start creating, you will need the following prerequisite. So first is we need a AWS account, right? So as you can see here, this is my AWS account. And after that here, After that, after the next prerequisite is here, you can see identify and access management. That means I am credential and programmatic access. That means you need a access key as well as secret access key. Okay, so as you can see here, AWS credential that are set up locally with the AWS configure. That means you need a secret access key and AWS access key as well as secret access key. Then you need the Ubuntu, right, instance. After that, you need to user with the sudo access. Okay, so I have already installed my instance here. As you can see, if I filter here, so running. So as you can see, this is my instance and the operating system is Linux. That means you Ubuntu, right? As you can see, I have already connect to my terminal. You can see. So I'm going to clear my screen first. Okay. Now here, so first of all here, we need to configure AWS, right? We need to configure AWS. So first of all, you need to install AWS, right? How to install? So as you can see here, this is the official site of AWS. Okay, so you need to install AWS from here. To install the AWS CLI. So first of all, to configure AWS, you need to install AWS CLI. Here, if I run AWS version, so as you can see, command not found. That means I don't have any AWS CLI, right? So we need to install first. So I'm going to install using this command. So first of all, I'm going to install using curl command. So that's why in my prerequisite, I mentioned we need a AWS CLI. So as you can see, it's installing. Okay. After that, we need to unzip this file. So if you have unzip package, then it will work. If you don't have unzip package, then they give us error. You can see command not found. So that's why first of all, we need to install this unzip package. So I'm going to install. So as you can see, it's done. Now I'm going to clear my screen first. And now I'm going to unzip my AWS package, AWS CLI, right? So as you can see, it's unzipped. Okay, it's done. Now let's clear the screen. Now the next command is, now let's install AWS using this command. Okay, so now I'm going to install my AWS. Okay, it's done. Now if you want to check the version, then you can run this simply command AWS version. So as you can see the details about our AWS CLI. Okay, now we have successfully installed our AWS CLI. Now in my prerequisite, as you can see, AWS credentials that are set up locally with the AWS configure. So we need to configure our AWS. So how to configure? So the command is simple. Simply you need to enter AWS configure. Then it will ask your AWS access key ID. So here is my AWS access key ID. You need to create first. So after that, it will ask my AWS secret access key ID. So I'm going to enter my secret access key ID. Okay. Now it will ask my region, right? My region is AP South -1. Then default output format. So I'm going to skip this. Okay. So it will successfully configure. Okay. Now we have successfully installed AWS CLI and we have successfully configured our AWS. Okay. Okay, the prerequisite is done, right? Now let's start to monitoring AWS using Prometheus and Grafana. So as you can see, the first step. So first step to monitoring AWS EKS using Prometheus and Grafana. First step, we need to install and set up kubectl on Ubuntu server. So before installing, you can see here, this is my instance. I have already installed and I have only one instance as of now. And if I go to my cluster, so as you can see, there is no any cluster as of now. No cluster, you don't have any clusters. Right? Okay, so let's start. So first of all, we are going to install and set up kubectl and Ubuntu server, right? So let's install kubectl. So you can see installing and setting up kubectl configures the command line interface essential for managing Kubernetes cluster. So as you can see the command to install and set up kubectl. So I'm going to install using this command, using curl command. So it's installing. It takes few seconds to run. Okay, it's done. Now the next command is we need to give the permission to this folder using this chmod command. So I'm going to give the permission. Okay. Now the next is let's check the version and details of about our kubectl. So as you can see, we have successfully installed our kubectl. You can see the details, right? Okay. I'm going to clear my screen first. That means I have successfully installed kubectl on my Ubuntu server. Okay, it's done. Now it's time to move next step. So the second step is install and set up eksctl on Ubuntu server. Right. So we are going to install and set up EKS. So how to install? So you can see the commands. So let's installing the setting up EKS simplifies and process of creating managing Amazon EKS cluster with its command line utility. So I'm going to using curl command. I'm going to set up this eksctl on my instance. So it's done. Now next step is we need to move this extracted binary to this location. So I'm going to move this eksctl folder to this particular location. Okay, it's done. Now let's check the eksctl version. If you want to check the details, then you can run the command eksctl version. So as you can see, now let's clear the screen. Okay, so it's done. Now let's check the third step. Now the third step is install Helm chart on Ubuntu server. So it's time to installing Helm chart involves deploying pre-configured package on Kubernetes cluster. So let's install Helm using this curl command. So I'm going to install Helm. Okay. Next is I'm going to give the permission to my Helm. Okay. Now let's start this Helm using this command. We are going to install Helm. It's downloading Helm as you can see. So it's done. Helm install. Okay. Now I'm going to run this next command. And the last one. So, okay, so let's clear the screen. And now if you want to check the version of your Helm, then you can run this simply Helm version. Okay. Then we have successfully installed Helm, right? Okay. Now the next step means the fourth step is here. Creating an Amazon EKS cluster using eksctl. Now it's time to create Amazon EKS cluster using eksctl, right? So here creating an Amazon EKS cluster using eksctl streamlines the process of setting up and managing Kubernetes cluster on AWS, and it provides a simplified command line interface for creating EKS cluster with predefined configuration and ensuring efficient cluster deployment. So it's time to create EKS cluster. So we have successfully installed eksctl. We have successfully installed AWS CLI. Then we have successfully installed kubectl, right? So now it's time to create EKS cluster. Okay. So here in AWS, if you run eksctl, then you can check this, you will find this page, right? EKS cluster. So now as you can see, no cluster, you don't have any cluster, right? As of now, I don't have any cluster here, right? So we need to create a cluster first. Okay. So as you can see here, yeah, I already one instance, right? In my cluster, as you can see, in this command, you can see first of all, I'm going to create cluster with the name EKS cluster, right? You can see the name here. Then region. So my region is AP South 1. That means I'm going to create this cluster in this particular region. Then version, right? So this is my version that I want to create my cluster. Then node group name. My node group name is my nodes. Then node type. I'm going to create this T3 dot medium, right? Then manage. So I am going to create two nodes. That means two instance with the type is 2 T3 dot medium. Then nodes and the maximum is 3, right? Minimum is 2 and maximum is 3. So that's why here I'm going to create two nodes, right? And my cluster name is EKS cluster. Okay. And my node group name is my nodes. Okay, so let's create this cluster. So I'm going to copy my command and creating my cluster. So as you can see, so I'm going to enter. So as you can see, it's creating my cluster. As you can see, the public IP and so on, you can see. Okay, so note one thing you can see here. I mentioned kindly note that it would take 50 to 20 minutes for this installation to complete. Once it's done, you can go to your AWS console and look for the EKS CTL cluster, right? That means that EKS CTL cluster creating timing needs 15 to 20 minutes. Okay, it take a 20 to 50 to 20 minutes for creating. So as you can see, if I go to my cluster page and refresh the page, as you can see, its status is creating and the cluster name is EKS cluster, version is 1.29, support time and provider EKS, right? So as you can see, it's creating. So that's why it takes 15 to 20 minutes. So please note this. It takes 15 to 20 minutes to create this EKS cluster. So we need to wait 15 to 20 minutes for creating. You can see the status is still creating. Okay. So as you can see here, first of all, it build cluster, then deploying stack. You can see it's waiting for the EKS cluster. Okay, so wait for 10 to 15 minutes to creating. So now as you can see here, we have successfully created our cluster, right? So if I go to my cluster page and refresh the page, so you can see the cluster name EKS cluster and the status is active. And as you can see, the version is 1.29, right? And here we have created two instance, right? With the name EKS cluster my node, right? My node, right? And the cluster name is EKS. And as I said, the instance type is t3.medium, right? We are creating two instance here with the name my nodes, and that's my EKS cluster name, right? So we have successfully create two nodes here, and we have successfully create our cluster with the name EKS cluster. And as you can see, the status is active and the version and provider is EKS, right? So as I said, it takes 15 to 20 minutes to create our cluster, right? You can see it started 1424 and it's end up 1438, right? So it takes 30 to 15 to 10 minutes to create, right? So it's done. So we have successfully created our cluster, right? Now the next step is this should confirm the EKS cluster is running or not. So how to check? So the command is here to check EKS cluster. That means EKS CTL get cluster name and our cluster name is EKS cluster and your region. So my region name is AP South 1. If you have region name is another, then you can put this. So now I'm going to run this. So as you can see here, EKS cluster and the version and the active date and timing, VPC, subnets, and so on. So that's the details of about our cluster, that VPC and subnets, which subnet we are used, which VPC are used, and the status is active or not, and the time and so on. So that's the details of about our cluster. So first of all, I'm going to clear the screen. And now the next is here, you need to update your kube config. So how to update? So the command is AWS EKS update kube config name, your cluster name and the region, right? So we need to update our kube config using these following commands. So as you can see, we have successfully updated our kube config. Okay. Now we need to connect to EKS cluster. So how to connect? So here to view the list of worker nodes as a part of EKS. So if you want to check, then you can run the kubectl get nodes command. So you can see the nodes, right? So first node is here and the another is here. So the status is ready, and as you can see, the age 3 minutes ago and version is same. Okay. Now the next stage, if you want to check the kubectl get ns, that means namespace, then you can run the command also. And you can see in this namespace, first of all, it's default, then kube node, then kube public, then kube system. and all status are active and the age is 11 minutes active. Okay. Now I'm going to clear my screen, and the next step is we need to add Helm stable chart for your local client, right? We need to add our Helm stable chart for our local client. So here you can see we need to add the Helm stable chart for your local client. So we need to execute these commands. So I'm going to run this command. So as you can see the message, stable has been added to a repository. That means it's done. Okay, now the next step is we need to add we need to add Prometheus Helm repository. So for that, we need to run this following command. So as you can see the message, Prometheus community has been added to your repositories. So it's done. It's also done. Okay. Now the next step is we need to add Prometheus Helm repository. Okay, we have done this right here. Okay, now I'm going to remove this. Okay, now the next step is we need to create Prometheus namespace, right? We need to create the Prometheus namespace. So how to create? So the command is kubectl create namespace Prometheus. Okay, we are going to create namespace, Prometheus namespace, and the name is Prometheus. I'm going to click enter. Okay, namespace Prometheus created. So let's check. So how to check? So the command is kubectl get ns. So now you can see Prometheus active and 9 seconds ago, right? That we have just created. So that's why the age is 9 seconds ago. Okay, so we have successfully created our Prometheus namespace. Now, next is we need to install Prometheus using Helm. So here we are going to installing Prometheus using Helm. So how to install? So the command is here, Helm install stable Prometheus community. Okay, so we are going to use this command to install Helm. Sorry, we install Prometheus using Helm. So as you can see, it's installing. So it takes few seconds to install Prometheus using Helm. So as you can see, it's done. You can see the names table, last deploy, namespace Prometheus, status deploy, revision, node, and so on, right? So it's done. Then now to verify if Prometheus has been successfully installed using Helm on EC2 instance, so you can execute the following command. So let's run this following command. Okay, so as you can see, it's running ready 2 of 2, 2 of 2, 3 of 3, 1 of 1, and the status is running, right? And age is 32 seconds ago. Okay, it's done. I'm going to clear my screen first. And now, next is to check the service file of Prometheus. We are going to run this command. So as you can see, the service file of Prometheus, the type is cluster IP and the age is here. And as you can see, the ports and all. Okay, it's done. Now, let's go to the step number 10. Now, the next step is we need to expose Prometheus and Grafana to the external world, right? So how to expose? So let's expose Prometheus and Grafana to the external world, right? So there are two ways to expose. So first way is through node port and the another way is through node balancer. So first is node port and the another one is load balancer. So let's go to the with load balancer. So to attach the load balancer, we need to change the cluster IP to load balancer. Okay, in this command to get this SVC file. So here, let's edit our Prometheus file to change cluster IP to load balancer. So let's copy the command. And here, scroll down. As you can see here, type cluster IP. So I'm going to replace with this load balancer. So how to replace? So press I for insert and enter load balancer. And press escape colon WQ exclamation and enter. So as you can see, service table, this kubectl Prometheus is edited. Okay, that means you have successfully changed this file cluster IP with load balancer. Okay, now the next is you can see if you want to change it from cluster IP to load balancer, make sure you save file. Okay, now next step is let's check the file kubectl get svc and Prometheus. So now here you can see we have successfully changed this Prometheus file. So you can see the cluster IP changes with this load balancer, right? Okay, it's done. Now let's access our Prometheus to this for the in this browser. So how to access? So this is my instance IP. So I'm going to copy my instance IP and enter and the colon, and here after that here the port number of Prometheus is 9090, but here I am going to use this external IP, right? So from here to here and hit enter here. Sorry. So here you need to copy this external IP first and enter here. You don't need any need to your instance IP. You need to copy this external IP colon and 9090. That's the Prometheus port number. Okay. Here we don't need this instance IP. So as you can see, this is our Prometheus, right? So we have successfully accessed our Prometheus in our browser. Okay. Now the next is here. Now let's change the SVC file of Grafana and expose it to the outer world. So let's come edit this SVC file. So using this command, so we need to change this Grafana, Grafana same for this. That means we need to replace this in cluster IP with this load balancer. Right. So escape colon WQ exclamation. So as you can see the message, service table Grafana edited. Okay, it's done. Right. So if you want to check, then as you can see the command to check kubectl get svc -n Prometheus. So as you can see here for Grafana, so this is our Prometheus, right? And here is our Grafana. You can see stable Grafana load balancer, right? So let's access this Grafana in browser. So I'm going to use this external IP and hit on browser. And the port number is 3000. So there is no any need to enter 3000 port number. As you can see, we are going to loading this. So as you can see the login page of Grafana. So the username is admin. So what about password? So here to get our Grafana password, we need to run this command. So you can see use the link of the load balancer to access from the browser. After that, use this link to get our password, Grafana password. So I'm going to hit this password here. Hit this command here. So as you can see my password of Grafana. So I'm going to copy this password and hit here. So as you can see, we have successfully logged into our Grafana, right? That is, we have successfully installed Grafana using Helm. We have successfully installed Prometheus using Helm. Okay, so it's done. Okay, here, if I go to this and go to this dashboard, so as you can see here, the functions, alert manager, core DNS, Grafana overview, Kubernetes compute resources, compute cluster, namespace, workload, pod, nodes, manager, cluster, namespace, right? So on. So if you want to check the particular, then you can click on this. So as you can see the detail graph, you can see a lot. So you can see the date and timing and with the graph. Okay. Now if you want to check another one, if you want to check the API server, so as you can see the graph of API server, right? So I'm going to discard this. Okay. So here, that's it, right? So here we have learned in this. So here we have learned how to monitoring AWS EKS using Prometheus and Grafana. So first of all, we have created our EKS cluster. Then we have installed Prometheus using Helm. We have installed Grafana using Helm. And here in last, we have monitoring AWS EKS using Prometheus and Grafana. Right. So now you can see our cluster is running, right? That means it's active and here is also active. So how to delete? So simply you need to run this command. You can see a cleanup or deleting the cluster. So how to delete? So you need to run this command EKS delete cluster hyphen name and then your cluster name. So my cluster name is EKS cluster. So here I'm going to enter the command EKS cluster. So as you can see, it's deleting, right? So it takes few seconds, sorry, few minutes, that means 15 to 20 minutes to delete, right? So you need to wait for this. After that, it will delete. So in this session, we have learned how to monitoring AWS EKS using Prometheus and Grafana. So thank you for watching and I hope you understand.